What if I told you that one of the most iconic songs in music history was born from what the writers themselves called a crummy idea, and that this supposedly original masterpiece was actually inspired by another artist's hit? The story behind the Beatles' chart-dominating phenomenon will make you question everything you thought you knew about musical creativity. 62 years ago today, on September 9th, 1963, the Beatles achieved something that would forever change the landscape of popular music. Their infectious single, She Loves You, sat proudly at the summit of the UK singles chart. But this wasn't just another chart topper. This was the beginning of an unprecedented cultural revolution that would reshape how we think about music, fame, and artistic influence. Here's where it gets controversial. Was She Loves You really the groundbreaking original composition that launched Beatlemania, or was it simply a cleverly reworked version of someone else's idea? Before we dive into that debate, let's examine the staggering numbers that made this song a phenomenon. She Loves You didn't just reach number 1. It obliterated every sales record in its path. The track became 1963's biggest-selling single throughout the United Kingdom, simultaneously earning the distinction of being the Beatles' most commercially successful single in their homeland. But here's the part most people miss. This song held the title of Britain's best-selling single by any artist for an incredible 14 years, only losing its crown in 1977, when Wings, ironically Paul McCartney's post-Beatles band, dethroned it with Mull of Kintyre. Think about that for a moment. 14 years of absolute dominance in an era when the music industry was exploding with talent and innovation. The song wasn't just popular. It was a cultural juggernaut that defined an entire decade and beyond. While the Beatles had already tasted success in their native Britain with Please Please Me climbing to number 2 and From Me to You securing their debut number 1 position, She Loves You represented something entirely different. This wasn't just domestic success. This was their first truly international breakthrough, a song that transcended borders and language barriers to capture hearts across continents. The track simultaneously conquered the charts in the United States, New Zealand, Norway, and Canada, proving that the Beatles weren't just a British phenomenon, but a global force. But here's where the story takes an even more extraordinary turn. She Loves You played a crucial role in what might be the most impressive chart achievement in music history. On April 4, 1964, the Beatles accomplished something that no artist before or since has managed to replicate. They occupied all 5 top positions on the American Hot 100 simultaneously. Can't Buy Me Love claimed the number 1 spot, followed by Twist and Shout at number 2, She Loves You at number 3, I Want to Hold Your Hand at number 4, and Please Please Me rounding out the top 5. This wasn't just success. This was complete market domination that bordered on the impossible. Now, here's where things get interesting and potentially controversial. The creative genesis of She Loves You reveals a fascinating truth about artistic inspiration that might challenge your assumptions about originality in music. Paul McCartney and John Lennon, the song's co-writers, have been refreshingly honest about their inspiration. Following a performance at the Majestic Ballroom in Newcastle, the duo found themselves traveling in a van when creativity struck. But their muse wasn't entirely original. They were directly influenced by Bobby Rydell's contemporary hit, Forget Him. As McCartney candidly admitted in later interviews, there was a Bobby Rydell song out at the time, Forget Him, and, as often happens, you think of one song when you write another. This raises a thought-provoking question. In an era where we celebrate originality above all else, should we view this admitted influence as creative inspiration or something more problematic? McCartney's initial concept involved a call-and-response structure where some band members would sing She Loves You, while others responded with Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, the writers initially dismissed this concept as inadequate, with McCartney describing it as a crummy idea. Yet this supposedly flawed concept became the song's most memorable and iconic element. The actual composition process was remarkably intimate and collaborative. McCartney described the creative session, We sat in a hotel bedroom for a few hours and wrote it. John and I, sitting on twin beds with guitars. This humble setting, two young musicians with guitars in a modest hotel room, produced what would become one of the most influential songs in popular music history. But here's what's really fascinating. The Beatles transformed what they considered a crummy idea into a cultural phenomenon that would influence countless artists for generations. The famous "Yeah, yeah, yeah" hook that they initially wanted to abandon became the song's signature element, proving that sometimes our initial creative instincts might be completely wrong. This story raises uncomfortable questions about creativity, influence, and originality in the music industry. If one of the most celebrated songs in music history was admittedly inspired by another artist's work and built around an idea the creators initially rejected, what does this tell us about the nature of artistic creation? Are we too quick to demand complete originality when most great art builds upon what came before? And here's the part that might surprise you. The Beatles' willingness to acknowledge their influences and transform them into something uniquely their own might actually be more honest and creative than artists who claim complete originality while secretly borrowing ideas. What do you think? Was She Loves You a masterpiece of creative transformation, or does knowing about its Bobby Rydell inspiration diminish its legacy? Should we celebrate artists who openly acknowledge their influences, or does this transparency somehow reduce the magic of musical creation? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe true originality exists in music, or is all creativity simply a matter of skillfully reimagining existing ideas?